Ready to elevate your fall fashion? Target's new limited-time-only fall designer collection with designers Kika Vargas, Laline, and Sergio Hudson isn't just about great style for all. It's also all about great styling. With so many ways to style them and wear them, the collection's versatile designer pieces are meant to mix and match and become new staples in your wardrobe. Get a sneak peek of the new looks by exploring the fall designer collection now on Target.com before it drops October 9th.
Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
Hey, BTB buddies, I've got James Inman on the show today. James was featured in the cult classic, The Unbookables, which was brought to us by Doug Stanhope. James is an interesting fella and definitely quite a bit different from what you see on The Unbookables. On The Unbookables, he looked a little out of control. The guy I talked to seemed a little bit more at peace, and years have gone by, so people grow. But he seems a little bit more at peace and definitely has a different perspective on comedy. I think this one was real interesting, and I got a lot out of it. I listened back to it, and I really think this is a good one. Now, I recorded this a while back, and the file was corrupted. I was able to get the file fixed, but it doesn't sound the best. I've done everything I can to make it sound as good as I can, and let me tell you, what you're hearing today is a lot better than what I had to work with before. So if there's some snaps and crackles and pops and it's a little bit crunchy, that's because the file was corrupted and I wasn't able to fix it as well as I want to. If you're able to get around that, though, it's a good one. It's James Inman. Let's do it. James Inman, how you doing, James?
Fine.
So some comedians get a little bit weirded out with me not wanting to talk to them a whole lot before the interview, but I like to get to know you while we're recording to have a good time. So I'm glad you're I'm glad you're here. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, like I told you before we started, I listened to your comedy stuff, your comedy albums you got out there. And then I watched the Unbookables, and the first thing I gotta try to track down is how did you and Stanhope get hooked up?
I met him at the Vail Comedy Invitational. It was a comedy festival that they were trying to create another one after Just for Laughs. Like Just for Laughs, some people had complaints about Just for Laughs, and so Judy Brown and Bud Friedman tried to start their own comedy festival in Vail, Colorado. And Judy Brown went all over the country and had these little contests. Mm-hmm. Like she had one in Boston, one in Las Vegas, one in Seattle. And so I had to go up against all the comics in Seattle, all the good comics, the headliners and stuff. Yeah. And I won that contest. And Doug won, I think, in Las Vegas. Jim Norton, he won like out in the East Coast in Boston or something. Uh-huh. And so that's when I first met Jim Norton and Doug Stanhope at that festival.
Okay. And how long had you been doing comedy before you did the festival?
Oh, probably about 15 years.
Okay.
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things, in watching the documentary, I've never seen a documentary that is as real as the documentary, The Unbookables, because I guess I know when somebody's fucked up because I've been fucked up plenty of times myself. And it's not something you can accurately fake. And during the first part of it, you guys were all pretty much fucked up. And so it's called Doug Stanhope's The Unbookables. So he knows all you guys, you and Andy and Sean and all the guys and Bill and all these people. So he knows you from different ways. So was it his idea to just do this documentary following you guys around, or was that your idea, or whose idea was it to put that together?
Well, what happened was I got punched on stage. Like in 2009, and it became a viral video. And Doug called me up and he goes, "Hey, I saw you got punched on stage. I saw that video." And he goes, I created a page on my website called The Unbookables, and he had all of his friends up there, that the guys that do edgy comedy.
Yeah.
And so I was doing, because my hero was Bill Hicks, and I've always done edgy comedy. I get punched on stage. Doug puts my video up there along with Sean Rouse, Braden Walsh, Travis Lipsky, Brett Erickson. And so that was a page that he had for a while, and he named it The Unbookables. And so he calls me up and he goes, I want to do something with The Unbookables. What do you think we should do? And I told him, I remember saying this on the phone. Doug is like, he'll deny this because he's drunk at the time. He doesn't remember, but I remember this. I go, we should just rent a van or a bus. And I know a documentary filmmaker in Seattle, and just have him film everything and make a documentary. And Doug goes, "No, that's a dumb idea." And so I'm like, all right, whatever. And so this documentary filmmaker guy keeps calling me, and he's like, I need a new project, because he just finished a film, and he's looking for another project. And I said to him, I go, I just talked to Doug, and he's wanting to do something with The Unbookables. And he's like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. And so what I did was I mailed Doug and Brian Hennigan a copy of this guy's first documentary. It's called Pirate Radio USA. And it was all about, underground radio.
Yeah.
And it was really a good documentary, grungy. This guy's from Seattle, and it's real political, and he's kind of an unbookable director. And so I called Doug up about like a week later. I go, "Did you watch the documentary?" It's like, yeah. So I was like, "Do you think we should have this guy do this?" He wants to do it. And Doug's the type of guy, like, Doug, he says anything you ask Doug. It doesn't matter what you ask him. Like, "Doug, can I use the bathroom?" No. That's his first response to any fucking question. "Doug, can I drink a big?" No. This time when I asked him, he didn't say anything, So I call up Brett Erickson and Norm Wilkerson. I'm like, he didn't say no, so he must want us to do this, And so and we weren't really getting much word from Doug or anything. I'm like, let's just do it. Fuck Doug, he's not going to help us. We're going to have to do this ourselves, So sure enough, we all, Norm Wilkerson booked some rooms down in Texas. Brett Erickson booked some stuff out in Indianapolis or Indiana, or no, Illinois.
Okay.
And I booked some stuff in Kansas City, and we just filmed it, And then, but after they filmed it, it took it took years to edit it and get it ready, because there's all this political bullshit going on in the background. We had lawyers arguing and shit, and it was crazy.
Was it about what you said, or was it about people that were shown in the documentary, or why were lawyers getting pissed off?
Well, I never heard the whole story behind that, but it was Doug's lawyers and Jeff, the director's lawyers, and they're arguing over the name. Doug didn't want to call it. The thing of it is, when I first talked to Doug, I we were talking on the phone, and I go, Jeff wants creative control. He wants full creative control. And I said, I think we should give it to him, because these movies that are made in Hollywood, they got like 10 directors and 10 different writers, and it usually sucks because they want to rewrite the ending and everything. And I go, the best movies are when they're made by Quentin Tarantino, or David Lynch, or Martin Scorsese. They have full creative control, and there's nobody coming in to rewrite the ending or anything like that.
Right.
And so Doug agreed with me, and so it was a verbal agreement, but Doug also signed a contract too. Jeff gave him a contract and said, I get full creative control, and they did that legally. But then years later, Doug wanted to come in and make some changes, and Jeff said, no, you gave me creative control.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what they were arguing about.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess what year was it actually recorded? It came out in 2017, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, technically it came out in December 7th, 2017, but really it was effectively 2018. By the time it got on Amazon Prime, we signed the contract December 2017, but by the time it got on Amazon Prime, Google Play, YouTube, the DVD came out everywhere. It was 2018, but we taped it in 2009.
Oh, okay.
But the director, he purposely, chose all the jumps and stuff to be kind of like timeless. So they weren't on anything topical.
Right.
So, so he knew that, it would be good 25 years down the road, because we're all talking about, Lipsky stop talking about cops. I mean, we're always going to have cops. I'm talking about relationships or whatever.
Yeah.
So he made it kind of timeless.
Now you look better now than you did in the documentary. Are you living any cleaner now, or is it just you got a good camera?
Yeah, I don't really drink as much as I used to. I because I'm almost 60, but I kind of separate my comedy character from my real life character. Like in real life, I'm not like that.
Yeah. Did you feel like when you were with those guys that you needed to push it a little bit to make the documentary more gritty or anything? Because I mean, you guys were pushing it.
Well, I mean, I didn't. I was just being myself, and after the first day, I completely forgot that those cameras are even there. But I think some of the other comics were trying to push it, like during the Kansas City scene. They're all like, they're trying to do edgy jokes on stage to piss off the owner. The owner ends up firing everybody except me. Yeah. But I was just like, just be yourself. You don't have to make yourself any more edgier than you already are. You know?
Right.
I didn't think any of that was going to make it into the film. Actually, I thought Jeff was going to cut that out. But yeah, when we got, I didn't want us to get fired, because that would kind of take a whole day or 2 days off of actual stuff that we use, but it ended up being, like the phone call and everything, it ended up being like the funniest part in the movie, really.
That was really the most compelling part of the movie is how you guys interacted after that. And during.
Yeah, I mean, that was the director, Jeff Pearson. He made that like the conflict in the movie. You know, should you stick to your guns and stick to your creative principles, or should you compromise just so you can, work and make money?
Now, I haven't seen comedy like what you guys do or did. Even Norton doesn't cross the line as much as you guys did in the particular sets that you guys were doing.
Yeah.
How do you think that type of comedy do you think you can still do it?
Oh, yeah, I still do that kind of comedy.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah. I mean, I taught myself improv like years ago. And so there are jokes that I do that are bits, and then there's parts of my act that I just talk off the top of my head.
Yeah. And in doing that type of comedy, I mean, really, it's in your face. It's geared to get a response and have some shock value to it. In doing that, so what I've heard from a lot of comedians that tour is when you're in the club, it doesn't really matter. It's that one person in the club that gets offended and they just go nuts on it and then create this big wave of shit that hits you afterwards. Is that still happening? Or when people come to the club now, do they pretty much know what they're going to get with you?
With me or just with
you? Well, anybody that does more edgy type of humor.
Well, the way I do it, I do it a little bit differently than what most comics do. Like the end product, the end product, what I do on stage ends up being edgy. But I try to do it to where they don't even notice, or they wouldn't even complain, or they're laughing so hard that they wouldn't think to complain. There was a time in my career where I would slip those jokes in, trying to offend the audience, and I could tell like half of them would be offended, and the other half, were laughing, and that kind of you get a little bit of rise off of that, but it's not real comedy. It's not real edgy comedy. To me, edgy comedy is when you do a great joke, everybody laughs, and they cannot deny that it was over the top.
Yeah.
Because they'll realize later that it was over the top. They'll say, "Oh, I can't believe I laughed at that."
Yeah.
But they won't get offended. They won't walk. I rarely have walkouts. And usually people like me on stage,
Yeah.
And so when I do the jokes that are edgy, it's more of it's in the improv, kind of talk it off the top of your head, and they get it. You know?
And you're not a mean-spirited type of guy. I mean, I can just see that from watching everything you do. A lot of it it's just what's going on in your own head as far as I can tell. And it's not, you're not lashing out at people. You are just saying what comes up in that weird head of yours.
Yeah. There's a reason why I kind of changed my whole creative process. Like I got invited to the Montreal Just Festival, and it was in 1997, and Bill Hicks had just passed away. Well, I mean, he passed away in 1992, but they had a Bill Hicks memorial, and they had this big room. All the comics showed up, and they showed clips of Bill Hicks, and they had a question and answer period afterwards. And there was a guy there that wrote for the Atlantic, and he's the guy that wrote that story about Bill Hicks in the Atlantic that got, kind of made Bill Hicks a like a Lenny Bruce or America.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at that festival, and I had a chance to talk to him. And so I was like, I want to ask him a question, but I don't want to, take up all of his time or anything. So I got up this really good question. I was like, what was Bill Hicks's, what was his creative process? Like, how did he write jokes? And the guy looks at me, he goes, Bill Hicks wrote on stage. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he didn't have a notebook. He said, if it was funny, you'd remember it. And I was like, oh my God. And then it kind of makes sense because, listening to Richard Pryor albums, you could kind of tell Richard Pryor is like talking off the top of his head.
Yeah.
And I remember reading Lenny Bruce's biography, that Albert Goldman biography, ladies and gentlemen, Lenny Bruce. That's how he wrote. He wrote on stage.
Mm-hmm.
He'd talk up the top of his head. And then, if it was funny, he'd turn it into a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did when I went back to Seattle. I'd never done this before, by the way. I always wrote my jokes in a notebook, memorized them, and then told them on stage.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to Seattle and I'm like, okay, I can't get fired at open mic night. So I would go to open mic night and they'd give you like 5 minutes. And I just go on stage. I just say whatever was on top of my head. Some nights it would kill. Some nights it would just like totally eat it.
Uh-huh.
And I did this for a while. Like I did this for months until I could and I started putting it in my act, and eventually 5 minutes became 10 minutes, 10 minutes became 20 minutes. And eventually that's how I wrote jokes, and because it sounds more natural. You don't sound like you're telling a joke,
Mm-hmm.
And so now, like when I look back, both of my CDs, like all the jokes on both of my CDs, I wrote all of those jokes on stage.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's, like the first 10 years of my career, I would write them down in a notebook. But then after I started changing the way I write, I started writing like Bill Hicks. And the funny thing is, I became more myself when I did that. I was less like Bill Hicks and more like myself because I was just being myself.
Mm-hmm. So when you go on stage with, say you do an open mic and you got 5 minutes, do you go up there with like 3 or 4 ideas that you want to work out? Or do you just go up there and look at the audience and say, okay, this came to my mind?
Usually it's like, it'll be something that, like on the way to the club,
Uh-huh.
there'll be something that's pissing me off or something I remember from during that week, like say an argument I got in with my girlfriend or something. And, it's generally something that happened that day,
Yeah.
Just whatever I can think of,
Yeah. So what were your teenage years like? We're about the same age, and I want to compare notes on that. What were you like as a teenager?
Oh, just, I was never the class clown. I was more like, I was the guy that was friends with the class clown.
Uh-huh.
And I always made friends with people that made me laugh. Like when I think about all my buddies in grade school and in high school, it was always these guys that made me laugh so hard I'd pee my pants. That was something else that would happen in grade school is I would laugh so hard I'd pee my pants.
Yeah. Well, at least you appreciated the humor. So were you like a major party animal as a teenager, or did that come later?
Not at all. I mean, I really never even I never liked marijuana. Like in high school, like I smoked it, and it always made me paranoid. I didn't even really see any cocaine until like 5 years into my career. I was probably 25 years old. I didn't really start getting interested in drugs until like since I was a comedian and that was my job, I had all day, during the day to read. And so that's what I did, before the internet came out. I would just hang out at bookstores and read books. And so I get stuck on a subject, and I just read everything I could get on the history of the 60s and LSD and drugs. So I kind of got interested in drugs later by reading books like The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by, Tom Wall, history of hallucinogenic mushrooms and all that sort of stuff, Terrence McKenna. So it's kind of more of a experimental thing with me than it is like party animal.
That's funny because I was kind of the same, but it was when I was a teenager, and I got it all out of my system by the time I was pretty much 20.
Yeah, I led a real mundane childhood. It was pretty boring.
So how does
I was in a band, I played guitar, but I didn't really do drugs.
What kind of music did you play?
Oh, I played Rush, Led Zeppelin,
cool.
Eddie Van Halen and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But by the time, New Wave and punk came out, I'd already sold my guitar and been doing stand-up.
So you still like music, I can tell, because I see those speakers set up.
I'm a big Elvis Costello fan.
Yeah. I got to see him, my wife and I got to see him, I think, was it 4 years ago in Grand Rapids, Michigan? And it was really a funny concert because you could tell that he didn't want to be there during the first part. I mean, you could just tell. It was just like, because I saw Deep Purple years ago and they were just like phoning it in. It was just like, okay, space trucking, da, 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 and okay, Smoke on the Water. Da, da. It was just ridiculous. And he was starting to do that. And then finally, I don't know what clicked. He finally started getting into it about a third of the way through. And then the rest of it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It's funny to be able to notice that. I saw Nate Bargatze in Indianapolis with my wife, and I liked it so much I saw him on the same tour in South Bend because we still lived up that way. And the difference between the two shows was just night and day. The Indianapolis show was fantastic. The South Bend show was, for everybody else, it was great. But I knew how good he was last time, and it wasn't the same thing. You could just tell he just wasn't on the same page as he was in Indy. Yeah, that's the way it is with comedy. Sometimes when you go up there, you don't want to be up there.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time in my career where I'd always drink before I went on stage because I think I had stage fright.
Yeah.
But after I taught myself improv, I started getting so good at it that I could just do it, in my sleep, So I started doing sober comedy, and I noticed that when I had 2 or 3 drinks, I would talk slower, and I didn't really like that. So then I started doing more sober shows, and then I would drink after the show, just because it's, you want to pronounce all your words clearly when you're up there so everybody can understand what you're saying.
So you've mentioned teaching yourself improv. Take me through that. What's that like to teach yourself improv?
We all do it. Like, we all know how to do it. We just don't know that we know because like right now we're just doing improv, we're talking off the top of our head. Every time you have a conversation, with your parents or your family or your friends, you're just talking off the top of your head. And one thing you notice is when you're just talking, you might accidentally mention something that goes too far, and you could tell they're not gonna laugh. They don't laugh. Like you're talking about something funny, and then you happen to mention 9/11, or you happen to mention cancer or something, and so you kind of you realize how to stay away from those topics, but still make it funny, and it comes through. Eventually, some will come up.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, oh, that's a good cancer joke. I'm going to keep that in because, it works.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, when you're just writing jokes and you try them over and over again and they won't work. It's like you're forcing it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do it, just talking up top of your head, you're not really forcing anything. You're just, it happens more naturally. And the other weird thing is, around that time when I started doing improv, is when I was studying the book, the Tao Te Ching, and that's it's a Chinese religion philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about naturalness and water and yin yang and everything. And so I was doing a lot of meditation at the time, and it just seemed like the obvious choice.
Mm-hmm. So, in thinking about improving and working with audiences that way, where you get to travel the country. So what areas of the country do you think your best audiences lie, and what part of the country are your worst audiences?
Well, okay, so I started comedy in the city, and I was never, I'd get laughs, but when I moved to Seattle, I noticed that like almost all my jokes worked.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something a comic told me once, like in rules of comedy, he said, you got to have an identifiable character. And one of the rules was the audience has to feel superior to you. And that makes sense because the fool or the jester, the clown, that's what we do. We're comedians.
Mm-hmm.
We're like the lowly character that's either that's irrational or crazy, or, if we say something clever, it happens naturally, because we're just like idiot savants.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so for some reason, like when I do comedy in Kansas City, like people, they're not that smart here in Kansas. Okay. So use a big word. They're like, oh, there you go. You're Mr. Know-it-all. You think you know everything. But in Seattle, like everyone in the audience is smarter than me because it's just like the smarter people in Seattle. Right. And so I was able to play the dumb guy easier in Seattle. Here in Kansas City, you got to like rub shit all over your body and fucking wear clown shoes. And they're like, oh, that's the guy that's dumb.
Yeah.
So it's easier to be dumb in Seattle. And so all my jokes work. Also, another thing they like in the West Coast, it seemed like they could understand character comedy better. Like, oh, this is a character.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking off the top of his head. I lived in New York for like 3 years. They didn't get me at all in New York.
Oh, really?
Because they're like, They were like, they didn't want to hear politics in New York. They just wanted to hear the jokes. If you listen to somebody like David Tell, you listen to his act, it's just joke. But somebody like me, they didn't get it. But I did really well in like San Francisco. I always did good in LA, but I never wanted to move to LA. That was that's probably why I never really became famous, because I hated LA. I never wanted to move there. But my jokes always work better in Seattle.
Ready to elevate your fall fashion? Target's new limited-time-only fall designer collection with designers Kika Vargas, Laline, and Sergio Hudson isn't just about great style for all. It's also all about great styling. With so many ways to style them and wear them, the collection's versatile designer pieces are meant to mix and match and become new staples in your wardrobe. Get a sneak peek of the new looks by exploring the fall designer collection now on Target.com before it drops October 9th.
That's interesting. How about Midwest? Kansas City's kind of Midwest, but did you ever do Indiana and I know you did Illinois. Yeah. So what do those audiences do, the Bible Belt folks?
Well, Indiana, Illinois. It's kind of like Kansas, it's the Midwest, and the sex jokes always work, my act pretty much, it was weird because sometimes, I played every state in the country almost, except for like I never played Maine, I never played Hawaii, but I played almost all of them. It was weird. There is a big cultural shift when you go from, like, I had to do a week in Atlanta, Georgia, and the very next week I was in New Jersey. And so it's like, it's just an attitude change.
Yeah.
Like you say the jokes differently, a little more sarcastic in New Jersey, and they'll still laugh.
Yeah.
There's certain things that unite us all, like old people and young people, city versus country, male versus female. And everyone knows what it's like to be high and drunk.
Yeah.
So there's certain subjects that just make any audience laugh.
Yeah. Do you know what do you have an idea, I should say, of what you're going to do when you get on stage based on where you're at and what you want to say?
Well, I don't really, yeah, I do. Because, from all the improv, I already have these set bits that I'm going to do. If I get paid, I'm doing all my best bits, and I'm also going to do a little improv, but, if there's a kind of a non-logical thing where you look at the audience and you can tell, but look at the clothes they wear, there's some people with blue hair, yellow hair, whatever. You get an intuitive sense about the audience. It's a lot different from somebody that's famous, like somebody like Doug Stanhope, because everyone's there to see Doug Stanhope and they know who he is. But guys like me, they don't know who I am. They're just showing up comedy clubs. So you got to deal with what you got,
Yeah, I've noticed that we've got a comedy club here in Huntsville, and I've noticed that the audience is super mixed because, you got down home Huntsville people, and then you've got all the people that relocated, and it's definitely a mixed vibe, and anybody that can kill at the local club here is definitely in tune with who they're talking to, which is really a room full of very different people. Yeah,
well,
that's why.
Like, in music, if you want to be a great guitar player, you got to learn everything. You got to learn all the scale. You got to learn all the chords. You learn classical. You learn blues. And so you become a well-rounded musician, and then you're a professional. You know how to make just about any audience laugh.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Now, one of the biggest debates I see all over the place is cancel culture. Is it a thing? Is it not a thing? Is it ruining comedy? What's your take on people being canceled and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I just being on Twitter, a weird thing happened to me once. I used to follow on Twitter this girl, God, what was her name? It doesn't matter. Anyway, she would the stuff that she would tweet, was all politically correct, and it was comedy that worked for Twitter, right? Anyway, she came to town and I watched her set. Same girl, completely different things that she would say on stage that she would never say on Twitter. So this whole cancel culture thing is just something for social media. That's why Dave Chappelle says, Twitter's not a real place. Because it isn't. Because it's a when you're doing Twitter jokes, they only work for Twitter. Sometimes they'll cross over and they'll work at a live comedy club. But cancel culture has no effect in the live comedy club because the joke either works or it doesn't.
Right. It's either funny or it isn't.
Yeah, the people that complain about it are the ones that are thinking too much. They're overthinking the art form itself. They're like, why can't I talk about the Holocaust?
Yeah.
It's like, well, those jokes had never worked. I mean, even when I first started comedy, before Twitter, before cancel culture, there was very few comics that had a Holocaust joke. It's not easy to write a joke about the Holocaust to make people laugh. I mean, it could be done, but you're going to be up there like Bill Hicks. I mean, he was able to take these subjects like the Gulf War, the war, hey, what's G13 do? Oh, it destroys everything but the fillings in their teeth. Pull up G13, So, he's talking about war, but obviously it's working.
Right.
Right. So to me, the comments that complain about cancel culture are just, they're not good enough. They'll do a joke that they think is edgy and it doesn't get any laughs. There could be 100 different reasons why that joke didn't get a laugh, dude.
Now there are, seems like there's a comedy community in every town now. It seems like everybody, they're doing open mics and they call themselves a comedian because they do open mics here and there and stuff like that. I'm a self-proclaimed hobbyist at being a comedian because I'm too old to start that shit over or start that shit because I didn't start until I was 52. But with this influx of so many people saying that they're a comedian, how do you know which ones are the real ones and which ones aren't? Because anybody can get like string together like 2 or 3 decent bits and have a good 3 minutes. You know what I mean?
It was always the way it was when I started was, quit your day job and you're traveling to different cities, making money by telling jokes. You go from, just doing it around your own city to actually traveling to different cities. And that's where you find out different cities have different things that make them laugh. Your joke about mass transit doesn't work in this city, and jokes about cars work in that city. So yeah, I would call somebody a real comedian, once they start traveling from city to city. But there are a lot of comics. They'll stay in that one town. All their jokes always work there, and like say a place like Austin or Denver. I remember getting off stage once at an open mic night. I was just in town. I was in Denver, and it was open mic. I go on stage, I kill, and I get off stage, and the MC, you could tell like she didn't like my act for some reason, and she's like, "Oh, a road comic." I'm like, "Yeah," like so you can spend a lot of time trying to be clever, but usually those people, they're not funny to begin with. I mean, they're thinking in terms of how to make themselves laugh, as opposed to how do you make the audience laugh. I balance it between myself, what I think is funny, and the audience. Like if it's something that only makes the audience laugh and I don't like the joke, I'm not going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
It's got to be something that I think is funny and the audience thinks funny. And so there's more of a connection there as opposed to somebody on stage just trying to be clever. Oh, I wrote this brilliant thing and you guys are supposed to like it. And if you don't like it, you're stupid, and those type of comics generally, they're jealous of the ones that can really do it, that really have a connection to the audience. And, I want to make sure they remember who I am.
Is there like a palatable feeling when you do connect? Because I know that I've done it plenty of times where I didn't connect, and I've done it times where I do connect, and you can almost feel it. It's almost like you're going from second gear in the third or something like that. It's almost, can you feel that when you're up there?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, in meditation, you sit down and you're saying to yourself, I'm meditating. But there's a moment where you start meditating so much that you kind of forget yourself and you forget the room is even there. And you and the room are part of the same thing. And so when you're really killing on stage, you kind of forget yourself. You forget that you're the one telling that joke. The really brilliant jokes, I mean, I don't feel like I wrote the joke. I feel like it was something that flowed through me. It was something that I came up accidentally. And so it's not really, we're all, once I really connect with the audience, we're all kind of laughing at the same thing. And they get that. Because nobody likes an egotistical asshole on stage. I wrote this joke. No, I'm going to say it. Nobody like, fuck you. You know?
Right. Now, you probably get at least a couple people that watch the Unbookables at every show, right?
Lately more, like Jeff Pearson, he passed away about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But he told me, that it's going to be different than like a TV sitcom because, if a comedian's in a sitcom, he's instantly famous. But something like a documentary or a movie, the fame kind of, it grows slowly, but it just keeps growing and growing.
Yeah.
And so I have noticed that, when it first came out, of course, I would walk around like a rock star, but nobody really knew. Just yesterday, I went to a comedy show. All the comics freaked out when I showed up, and they all wanted to take their pictures with me. I'm like, oh my God, I got to get out more, But, like lately, I've been doing this a lot longer than Doug. So my career is kind of on its, the down slope. And I haven't been getting out doing comedy that much, so I never became famous like Doug, he's doing it all the time. But like I said, it's not that I'm tired of it. It's just that, that movie, I don't know how to market it or I don't know what to do, because it did kind of hurt my, reputation a little bit, like there's a lot of clubs that can't work because I was in that movie.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
There's other clubs that they want me.
Yeah, that's really why I asked that question, because it seems like somebody who watched the movie is expecting something different from you than you might bring up.
Well, I mean, I still do, like I said, I still do improv and stuff, and I can still pull it off. To tell you the God does truth, I was working on that movie for so long now. It's just like, I have another stage in my career. I don't really know what to do now because I want to do something different, but I'm proud of that movie, but, it's kind of hard to, like if I don't live in LA, I don't really know what to do. I live in Kansas City now, and it's the whole thing was just a weird journey.
Yeah,
let's say that. But I mean, I'm proud of it because I lucked out meeting Jeff, and we were both into the same kind of music. Like we were both into punk rock, and so when I watch this movie now, it just kind of reminds me of like a comics version of punk rock.
Yeah.
Because
I got that. Yeah.
Like if you look at what the Sex Pistols and the Clash did, bands like Journey and Pink Floyd and they were playing these huge stadiums. The Sex Pistols, the Clash, they would play these tiny little bars, and they're like, "Fuck Journey." This is the Clash. We're gonna DIY, do it yourself, we may not be good at these instruments. We're just going to pick up these instruments and play. And so it's funny because some of those Unbookables, they didn't even know what punk rock was. I mean, like Travis Lipsky, I was trying to tell him about the Clash. He didn't even know who the Clash was. And I'm like, dude, I'm trying to, he doesn't know, because I'd had some of Doug's bands, they're not all that smart. I remember the one guy, I asked him what he thought of the movie. He goes, I didn't like it. I'm like, why did you like it? He's like, well, you're playing all these tiny little rooms. I'm like, yeah, that's why it's funny. I mean, it's not like anything you'd see on Comedy Central. Like, you turn on Comedy Central, every one of those comics are playing in this big, nice looking room. The comics got really nice clothes on. And, I mean, they're just now filming some of these specials in little rooms, Yeah. And you can tell, I've seen people rip off the Unbookables. I mean, it's funny.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because I mean, it really, as somebody who kind of understands comedy and knows what it's like to be on the road, I can see that movie just being a point in time for people. It's just like, oh yeah, I did that. I had nights like that. I got fired. I was too drunk to be on stage. That type of thing. And it's it's real. So that's what I really liked about it, was the fact that it was, it just felt like what real traveling comedy is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really proud of it. Jeff, I was friends with Jeff for years, and I had no idea that he'd worked so hard on that film. It was really a labor of love for him, and he was proud of it too.
Mm-hmm. Has he had anything come out since?
No, I mean, he after the movie came out, he was thinking about redoing his. He used to have a show called Deep Face the Nation that was on. He had the #1 public access show. That was another reason why he was such a good guy, because he'd been around cameras and studios and editing for years.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 90s, he had the #1 public access show in Seattle, and he used to get written up in the local paper all the time because it was a really brilliant political show.
Uh-huh.
But then he got into making film, and he made Pirate Radio USA, and he made the Unbookables, and then he got cancer. He died.
Oh,
yeah. But I mean, I loved. He was a fun guy. I think he had a degree in debate or something, but he is really brilliant with politics. We get on the phone, we talk for hours about politics and making each other laugh.
That's great. And what I really liked about the movie was the fact that he really was a fly on the wall. He did not insert himself into any of it at all. And I thought that was really cool, because some documentarians, they accidentally step in the frame or do something stupid just so that they can be seen. And he didn't do that. And I respected that.
Yeah. Because he'd seen so many documentaries, or he knew what he was doing. When he first got back to Seattle with all that film footage, he had like 150 hours worth of film footage.
Mm-hmm.
They had to go over and basically take 150 hours and cut it down to like an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a time at first where he wanted to interview some famous comics. Like, he wanted to interview Joe Rogan or, Dave Attell, but he had no connections.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he'd call up, he called me up. He's like, how do I get a hold of Joe Rogan? I'm like, I don't know. So that's when he said, okay, I think he saw the movie Jesus Camp. Now, Jesus Camp is a great documentary, and it's fly on the wall.
Uh-huh.
Like, you're watching all this stuff, and nobody tells you what to think about it. And when he first started telling me, I think I'm going to make it like Jesus Camp where it's a fly on the wall. And I didn't know what he was talking about, you know? But yeah, it turned out to be really different from just about any comedy documentary that's out there.
Yeah, it's really good. One of the things I like to ask everybody I talk to is when you are in a club, say you're just doing an open mic or something like that, and you see somebody that is definitely new to it, but they've got that spark, and you can tell that they could be really good if they really stuck to it and worked hard at it. What shortcuts would you give them to get better in that first year instead of just being so shitty that first year? What shortcuts would you give them to understand what comedy's all about and just be a better comedian?
Well, of course, I'd tell them, you know, to try improv and actually try improv. And the hard part about improv is once you teach yourself how to do it, you find out that going from your set written material back into improv and going from improv back into your set material where you're juggling things around, that will teach you a lot about the difference between a joke you've written and a joke you just come up with on top of your head. And you really need to be able to think while you talk. And like I taught myself how to meditate. And so I really kind of learned how to know that what I was saying, but also know in my head what I was going to say next. So you're juggling a lot of different things in your head, and you got to learn how to do that. You can't just be, you know, talking about something and not know what you're going to say next. That would be a skill I would learn. The other thing I would teach myself is just pick up a book and read out loud once a day for like 10 minutes. So you get a command of your speaking voice. Because a lot of times the reason why we have stage fright is because we don't feel confident with our voice. But when you practice every day on just talking, I mean, even like say you're driving in the car, nobody's around, just talk like you're doing a radio show and you gotta fill in dead air. You'll find that, oh my gosh, I've got spaces where I'm thinking and I'm not talking. So you got to be able to do that. You got to be, I guess it's called being quick on your feet.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard that. Just grab a book and read 10 minutes out loud. That makes a lot of sense. And I wish I would have done that before I started, because it's so funny. And you may have gone through this. You write all this stuff that just looks brilliant on paper, and you've never said it out loud, and you go on stage and it just sucks. Because
that's why when you write on stage in the moment, that's where you're going to find out if it works or not anyway. Because you can write a joke and you can sit there and think it's funny, but when you do it on stage, it doesn't get a laugh. There is a disconnect between what you think, your fantasy, and what the real world is like. And you got to get out of that fantasy world and find out more about the real world of, you know, what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, with you meditating, do you ever do any like visualization type exercises where before you get on stage, you visualize it going well?
No, I'm not very good at that. I mean, because when I first started studying meditation, I knew that was a type of meditation. And whenever I tried it, I was never good at visualizing things. So I do a different type of meditation. My meditation is more with words. You know, I say the words slowly in my head, or I say them out loud or whatever. But before I go on stage, it's more like I usually tell myself that I'm not funny, because the funny thing is, when you have a really good show the night before and you're walking around like you think you're God skipped the comedy, that's when you have a bad show,
Yeah.
you know? So
Every time.
So I also noticed, like, after a really bad night of comedy, the very next night will be a good show. So I just started telling myself before I went on stage, I suck. I'm not funny. And I would go on stage and I'd be funny. So it's kind of no expectations, kind of. I would put myself in the mental state of having no expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I personally have been stuck in the fact, stuck visualizing myself doing well at something I've never said. And then when I get up there, it doesn't go well. And but I've used visualization in other ways too that work, but I asked you that because I don't think it really works for comedy, and at least not for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's with meditation or prayer, you know, there's a lot of like I'm not into the type of meditation that has anything to do with hope, you know, like I hope this is going to be better than what it is now. The type of meditation I do is like, I'm in that moment. There's no past, there's no future, just right here now. And so that kind of just works better for comedy, I think.
Yeah.
You know, because if you sit and think about, oh, I want to have a great show, and it doesn't turn out, you know, it's never gonna turn out the way you think it's gonna, you know, it's nothing in life ever turns out the way you think it's going to turn out.
Right.
You know,
and it's a lot harder.
You got to kind of live in the moment.
Right. And it's a lot harder to dig yourself out of a bad start when you visualize this great set. You know, you just, oh man, everything worked perfectly. And then all of a sudden the wheels start to come off and then you can't adjust because you are still in this visualization mode where everything's supposed to go right. And
fuck that. But what's funny is, you know, when you dig a hole and you're able to do improv, then you're able to tell a joke about how that last joke didn't work.
Yeah.
And so that makes the audience laugh because, like, oh, he doesn't take himself seriously. He's not repeating these jokes like a robot. What I see so many comics make the mistake of just reciting their jokes like they're a robot, like they're acting on stage. Like, I'm an actor and I'm going to do my script, you know, you know, with comedy, it's supposed to be, it seems like it's supposed to be unscripted.
Right.
So you better learn how to do that anyway.
Right.
Funny thing, what happened to me once was, one of the most extreme cases of this was I was doing comedy at a small club in Seattle once, and it was the comic showed up. I was there, but the booking agent didn't tell us who was supposed to headline it, right? And so it came close to the show, and I asked this guy. I said, "Dude, you know, where do you want to go up?" You know, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a headliner." I'm like, "Okay, are you sure?" I mean, you know, you don't really know me from Adam, but he was really confident in wanting to headline, right? And which is a big no-no when you're doing comedy, because you never know who you're going up after.
Yeah.
But, you know, this guy didn't give a fuck, right? So MC goes up, and, you know, spotlight goes up. I go on stage, I kill, you know, I do like 30 minutes, and because I'm doing improv, and he goes up on stage and he starts doing his act, right? Just repeating it like a robot.
Yeah.
And and nobody's laughing. It's like just like 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes go by, nobody's laughing, and he's still just doing his jokes, and he's not even addressing the fact that the jokes are not working.
Yeah.
Right? So then a fight breaks out in the room where tables get knocked over, glasses get broken, and there's a fight, and he's still doing his show, and he's not addressing the fact that there's a fucking fight going on in the audience. That's how dumb this comic was.
Wow.
Right? I'm gonna, you know, because you get caught up with your act, and you think you're so great, and you think your jokes are so great, you're just like, I got to tell this joke because it's so great and I'm so brilliant. Well, you cling to that. You cling to that little joke and you think it's so precious and stuff. I mean, dude, there's a fight going on, and 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 finally, after 45 minutes is up of him reciting his act, he thank you good night. It was the weirdest fucking thing I ever saw in my life.
That's wild. That's wild. It's funny. I used to have a joke where and it was a true story. A cashier said I look like an older Harrison Ford, and that was a great setup for a joke. But in between the time I started doing that joke and now, I went from contacts to glasses and I shaved my head. So that joke just can't work anymore. And that was one of that was like my closer. And I had to totally rethink my whole act because of that joke. And it's kind of funny how aging and things that happen to you kind of change your act.
I mean, that's another thing you can fall into a trap of doing your act and something changes and you're not able to change or I guess adapt to, what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that is part of the disconnect between what the audience sees as a comic up there completely disconnected from reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
For instance, like comic that say something changes, like the way we view gender and identity, which is a big thing right now. And I'm gonna stick to this thought that I had 10 years ago, and I'm right. And I'm like, well, the world has changed since then, and when you do that now, it doesn't get a laugh. So why cling to something that you think is true when reality itself has changed?
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. I think that's why a lot of people have a problem with wokeness or whatever. It's like things change, dude. Things that are not always going to stay the same, where you're going to cling to this idea of what a male or a female is.
Right. And it's not like it's anything new. Things have been changing since the dawn of time. And everybody thinks that all this stuff that's coming about now is just all new. Well, no, people were gay in the 1800s, and people, wanted to be a different gender at that time, but they have the means to do it now. And it's just not okay to put that down anymore. So unless you can do it in a funny way and you're in that world enough that it's something that is right and okay. But it's I don't want.
I my deal is a comic's job. We're lowly to begin with. I mean, we're not special. We're different from like a priest or a politician or a professor. All those are jobs that have power, and the comic is the guy that doesn't have any power at all. And so our job is to punch up. We're not. That's because it just jokes about ugly people or fat people. Those jokes never really worked very well. I mean, I guess there might have been a time where it was funny to say that because, you're not supposed to say that. But in reality, the really good comics, I mean, the guys like Mark Twain or Jonathan Swift or, I mean, they're always, they were like, I already know how to do comedy. I'm going to make jokes about the king, because that's where it's really risky.
Right.
When you're, like you're Bill Hicks and you're making fun of the Gulf War, while the war is going on.
Right.
I mean, that's where you really take a risk. I honestly don't think, a woke crowd of, there's never been a time where I've been afraid of like a gang of homosexuals beating me up after the show. Yeah. I've been afraid that some soldiers were about ready to kick my ass after the show, after I, and so that's what you're really at risk when you're making fun of like war, politics, rich people.
Yeah.
I mean, rich people can really fuck up your life.
Yeah.
The club owner, if you make a joke about the club owner, it better be funny and he better laugh at it. Because and if you're up there just making fun of this girl is ugly or she's fat or whatever, I mean, that's really not that dangerous of a joke.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's been done so many times that it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, I mean, I made fun of ugly people when I was in grade school, dude.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not. How is that funny? I mean, it's funny on a really low level,
Yeah.
And so when you're doing stand up, I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig that. Well, I got to say, I really enjoyed getting to know you, and doing the homework and watching the movie and listening to your stuff was really enjoyable. And you are, I can tell you're a more peaceful person than when that was shot, and I'm glad.
I've always been like that. I mean, I was in the zone when we were doing that movie.
Yeah. Now, before we end, you wrote a book called The Greyhound Diaries that I haven't had a chance to read yet. What's that all about?
Well, I kept a diary. When I lived in Seattle, I had to take the bus a lot because the plane wouldn't fly to like places like Spokane. It was just too expensive, so I would take the bus. And I found a diary one day, and I started writing the diary, and it was just, I looked at it and it was all about being on the bus because I was writing the book on the bus. And so that I just had the idea that I would just only write in this diary whenever I was on the bus. So I over the years, whenever I took the bus, I would just write about the bus. And eventually I started taking pictures of, some of the funny stuff that happened on the bus. And that was back before digital cameras. And, I used slides. And so it became a slideshow. It became a one-man show.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And so the whole book is about riding the bus.
Yeah, that's great. And one of my favorite jokes of yours is about the Greyhound when the Western movie is on all the screens and you can't get any sleep. I love that one.
Yeah, that's in the Greyhound Diary, but it's on my CD because I had some excerpts, outtakes from the Greyhound Diary live show.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, well, James, it was really great getting to know you. And do you have anything you want to plug? Any of your social medias, or you got anything going
on? Just watch that movie, The Unbookables. I'm proud of that. Buy my book. I got 2 CDs out. Misogynist Clown and the Pander Monkey. Those 2 CDs. I put out all on the same day. It's basically it's a double album, but it's on 2 topics. Pander Monkey is more like politics, and Misogynist Clown is all about relationships and women. So check those out.
Which one was it? Lipsky that called you Pander Monkey?
That was Andy Andrus.
Andy, okay.
Yeah, he called me a Pander Monkey, and so I just took that and I made it a title of my CD.
Yeah, I remember that line, but I couldn't remember who said it. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it, James.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah. You can stick around for a sec if you want.
Oh, okay.
Ready to elevate your fall fashion? Target's new limited-time-only fall designer collection with designers Kika Vargas, Laline, and Sergio Hudson isn't just about great style for all. It's also all about great styling. With so many ways to style them and wear them, the collection's versatile designer pieces are meant to mix and match and become new staples in your wardrobe. Get a sneak peek of the new looks by exploring the Fall Designer Collection now on Target.com before it drops October 9th.